In this video, we'll be taking a look at Ilford's Ortho Plus 80. Ortho Plus 80 is a black and white orthochromatic film with an ISO of 80. Orthochromatic means that the film is blue and green sensitive and that it is not sensitive to red light. This is a spectral sensitivity chart, and you can see that it cuts off right around 560. So 560 falls in between the green and the yellow, so anything beyond that, yellow up to red, is going to be less sensitive on this film. For this test, I exposed the film at ISO 80, and I developed an EcoPro, which is the Xtal clone, at a 1:1 dilution. With knowing that the film is not sensitive to red, initially you might be thinking to avoid red in your images, but I think the inclusion of red in your images helps to add more of the contrast and brings more of a dynamic look to the film. This is a Zone 5 normal exposure, and you can see that the overall contrast is pretty high, the whites are very bright, and the red portion of the costume is not completely invisible or underexposed. It is very dark, but you can see it still gives tonality to the overall image. This is what I was talking about with the red. Including some red in your image helps to bring out more of the contrast, and being that the film is very blue sensitive, the blue area of the costume kind of has like a glowing, haloing look to it, and you'll see that in images with a lot of blue. Here's the same image at a -1 exposure, and I think this is kind of the sweet spot of the exposure. I noticed with this film, it's almost like slide film in a way where you kind of have to nail the exposure because since it's not sensitive to the entire spectrum, you get this really skewed tonality. So sometimes if you underexpose too much, the image just falls really flat. Here's the same image but 2 stops underexposed, and you can see that everything goes really dark. The closet in the background is wood, so there's a lot of red and yellowish tone in there, so it pretty much goes underexposed. And then the red in the costume starts to go pure black. One thing I wanted to note, looking at the blue portion, the shadow detail is still really good. It's not too underexposed. So if your image does have a lot of red and you're trying to add that contrast in, the blue areas are still going to have normal tonality, but the reds are going to go really dark depending on your exposure. I did also photograph a tomato on the film because I wanted to see what another pure red object would look like, and again, I think the level of contrast and the deep dark tone that the red gives on this film, I think adds a nice layer of separation that is going to be much punchier if you carefully select what you're including that's red in your image. When it comes to grain and sharpness, the film is an 80 ISO film, so you're going to have pretty fine grain and good sharpness, although I don't think the film is quite as sharp as like an FP4 or Pan F, but I think the sharpness is still fine. Overall, I think this is an interesting film, and it's one that I would definitely shoot again, but I would use it if I was able to plan out what I was going to shoot. I think it would be better if you were able to select the clothing and maybe the makeup or something to enhance those dark tones of the film. I do like the dark, bold punchiness of the red, how it renders on this film. I like the separation that it gives in the tones. It gives a much more dramatic dark shadow, and I think if you're able to plan that out, the film would yield the best result. Let me know in the comments. Have you guys shot this film, or would you be willing to give it a try? And we'll see you guys next time on The Negative.